you see the best 2 minutes of our day. You don't see the 12 hours before when we were shooting high school football highlights in the pouring rain. The doctor was like, girl, I'm hearing 2 heartbeats. And I was like, yeah, mine and the baby. And she was like, no, you got 2 babies in there. And I was like, I want to be baptized. Like, I want to just totally devote my life to the Lord. And it's a feeling that I still remember.
Well, we always strapped up. So I'ma just turn to it.
I love it. Cory, I had twin girls 3 months ago.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
3
sleep.
months this week.
Like, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Each day, truly, like, each day is different. It's been a whirlwind. It was a total God thing that we had twins because we have no twins in the family on either side. And the type of twins that I had, they're fraternal, so they look like nothing alike. That's supposed to be genetic. So when I went to my first ultrasound, the doctor was like, girl, I'm hearing 2 heartbeats. And I was like, yeah, mine and the baby. And she was like, no, you got 2 babies in there. I was like, I'm sorry, what? It was a whirlwind from then on. That was last September, end of September. And we were like, oh my gosh. But it was like, it's been the biggest blessing. We could not imagine. It's not just double the work. It's like 3 times the amount of work. But we couldn't imagine it any other way. One is exactly like my husband and looks just like my husband. And the other one is exactly like me and looks just like me. So we're having so much fun and our parents are having fun with that. But truly, like, each day is different. And now I went back to work July 2nd at they were about 11 weeks old. So I was a little nervous about that, like how I was going to feel. But honestly, like, it was great. I needed it. I needed to get out of the house. I needed to get out of my pajamas. I needed to do like what I loved again. Not that, I don't love being a mom. It's just a total 180, especially with twins. So it was nice just to like, when that camera goes on and you're like, all right, we're just sitting here talking ball. I'm not changing the diaper. I don't have to spit up on me. Like, the girls aren't crying. It's all good at home. So that was nice. But then I'm not going to lie, like, the second I was off air, I was like, all right, I don't even want to sit through this baseball game right now. I want to go back to my girls and be home with them. So each day it got easier, though. I did a 9-game stretch, my first stretch back. But then I'm off for a week. So it's like, it's a really good balance of like working, then off, and then working and off. So, but yeah, it was a total God thing. When we get overwhelmed and we're like, this is so hard, we're like, God truly chose us to be twin parents. We don't know why. Hopefully this is our only set of twins. Hopefully next time it's just like one baby. But we're like, you know what? He had a plan in this, and we take it day by day, and it's been a whirlwind, but it's been so fun.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Wow. Hey, man, welcome back to Game Day Grace, bro.
I know about to say, in fact.
We didn't do no intro. We just got right into it. Welcome back to Game Day Grace. I'm David Schiele. That's Cory Mose. And already getting comfortable on the believer's bench with us is somebody that I not only work with, I broke bread with. I prayed for her. She done prayed for me. Her husband helped me move. So we spent a lot of time together. Madison Hock of Valley Sports Southwest. You were already talking about it. You just had twins, which is crazy because I knew you before you were even engaged to your husband.
Yeah.
Just to see you now as a mother is like, bro, this is crazy to me. Like, it is insane. Do you ever feel like, bro, like, I'm really a mom right now? Like, I got responsibilities.
Every day. I mean, like I said, they're 3 months old, and we still look at them and we're like, wait, did you know we have 2 babies laying in their cribs back there? Like, we're like, what is going on? And it is still just like mind blowing to us. And every day I look at them, it's kind of weird because Collins, who was baby B, she was born second. She looks just like me. She is my side of the family. Her mannerisms, she's sassy. She is me. And then Scotty, our other girl, who was baby number 1, came out first. She looks just like my husband, is like him made over. So our parents are having so much fun when they look at him because it takes them back 28, 29 years ago to when we were babies. So, but it's weird because I look at Scotty and I'm like, am I sure that you're my daughter? Because she looks nothing like me, nothing. And then Colton's the same way with Collins. Is like, she looks nothing like me. But it has been, like I was saying, it's been crazy. But truly, like my husband, a little background on him, he's played baseball for the last 7 years in the Marlins organization. And last year was his free agency year and he got hurt. And it was the first time he's ever been hurt in his entire career. Never even like stubbed a toe, never had a blister, nothing. And so we were like, it was tough because it was an injury that kept him out all season when he was in a high leverage situation where he needed to get re-signed. And so we were just like, all right, God, like, what are you trying to tell us? Like, why is Colt hurt, right now? But it allowed us to have the most time we've had together in 6 years since we've been together. So like that was a blessing in disguise. But it's crazy. I mean, y'all know it. Y'all hear the Lord all the time. It was July of last year and he was pretty down in the dumps. And I went to Miami to visit him where he was rehabbing his arm and just heard like the Lord visited me in a dream and heard him say, you got to tell him to fight. And it was just like, this is not the hardest thing you guys are going to go through. Like, you have to fight. And 6 weeks later, we found out we were pregnant with twins. So we were like, okay, so this is maybe the hardest thing we're going to go through. And it's not. And I know that. And it's the best thing. Like, hard is so subjective. But it definitely put it in perspective when he was dealing with an injury. He had a new purpose of, it's so much greater than baseball and himself. He now feels like he's playing for the girls and things like that. So it's kind of fun how you just totally shift your focus when you become a parent. Like, we're still locked in on the things that we love, but like first and foremost, our girls are at the center of everything and we're very thankful for that. But it's definitely been a lot of highs and a lot of lows.
I have a
Most
question
definitely.
just about like what you just mentioned. I'm interested to know how did y'all kind of lean into the Lord during that time? Because coming off injury and then heading into free agency, I'm sure there's a lot of unknowns, and the
Yeah.
anxiety may have built up there. And so I
Yeah.
know a lot of people deal with anxiety on a daily basis, but it's something that talks about a career, right? And
Yeah.
having someone trying to trust you, even though you haven't showed what you can do in the field for so long, what was that like? Trying to lean into the Lord in that time and hoping that He lands in the right situation.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I mean, it was hard, like, not even going to sugarcoat it. And my husband, David, knows him. He's somebody that, like, he has no bad days. Like, the grass is always green, the sky is always blue. Like, not that he's unrealistic. That's just his personality. That's why I love him so much, because he's so positive and he's so strong in his faith that he knows at the end of the day, like, it's going to be God's plan either way. So I think honestly, like, watching him go through that was so humbling for me to be like, okay, everything in perspective. Like, yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The anxiety was there for him for sure. Like, I mean, still even now, like, still trying to come back. It's some days it's harder than the other, but I tell people this all the time. Like, if roles were reversed and it was me that like had just lost my career for a year and like had to take time away and then became a mom, like, it would have been really, really tough on me. But he is so rooted in his faith and he challenges me every day in that and supports me every day in that. So I think literally it was just like the Lord giving him peace. And like I mentioned, like, briefly, when the Lord like spoke to me and just said, you got to tell him to fight, like, and it was kind of like a childlike sense of humor, the way he was speaking to me. It was just like, he's throwing a baseball, he's good, but like, this is not end all be all. Like, it's gonna be okay. And from then on, that was July of 2023. From then on, it was just kind of like, all right, take a deep breath, what's meant to be. And that's kind of like the mindset we have right now. Like, if baseball is still his future, like, it's gonna happen, but it's what's meant to be. And all he can do is like control what he can control. And it sounds like so cliche, but the second you can kind of like come to terms with that, I think it's just frees you, as David was talking about earlier, like, just gives you a sense of freedom that like God's plan is going to trump like your anxiety. So, but I don't want to sugarcoat it, because there were some hard days for like both of us. And we were kind of, questioning, like, why would this happen now? Why would he get injured in his last year when he was supposed to debut and he was pitching better than ever and he felt so confident? It's like, why now? But I think we all kind of like go through different things where we do at some point question the Lord and like, why is this happening? Why is the timing of it happening? But the more you lean into the word and the more you talk with like believers, like minded, and get advice and just be able to speak through it and have them speak through you, I think it really helped with a lot of the anxiety. And it does sound more simple than it was because we're like out of it now from an injury standpoint, but he's still trying to work his way back. So he's still living with that anxiety sometimes and insecurity sometimes of like, am I going to make it back? But I think just having each other and having somebody like we're both rooted in our faith, I think that's like 101. You are who you surround yourself with. And I think that is like most important. So each day is a challenge, but you just work through it together, I think, and you open the word and listen to how the Lord wants to speak. And I think truly like, for me, I always like grew up in church and I always was like, quote unquote, like a textbook believer. Like my parents woke us up for Sunday school every morning. We went to Sunday school, church, all the things. And I had different like come to Jesus meetings, like moments in my life. But that last July was the first time that like the Lord really like, for lack of a better term, hit me in the face and like woke me up and was like, I'm here, listen to me. And I think it was kind of cool that he like came to me to speak to Colt. And not that he wasn't speaking to Colt, but I saw a quote one time like, the Lord will meet you where you are. And for women, a lot of times it's at home and it's, in the kitchen or, just at being at home. And I think, that's exactly how it was for me. And I think that it was really special. So I think if you can just take a deep breath and know that like at the end of the day, God's plan is going to prevail, then it takes away some of that anxiety, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Thank you for giving us a little bit of your life. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I'm an open book. I'm an open book.
That was good. I think the thing that I find most interesting is you said you had the multiple like come to Jesus encounters, and with July, like last July being like the latest one, what were some of the other ones that you can remember? Like, okay, I've had a few moments in my life where it was like, okay, his presence is in this room right now. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Well, I think first and foremost, when I got saved, and as I mentioned, like I grew up in the church and going to church was always like priority number one. But what I respected about my parents is they wanted us to get baptized on our own. Like when we, like with their support, but like when we were ready and we fully understood what we were doing, it's not like they baptized us as a baby, which there's nothing wrong with that. They just wanted us to understand the commitment that we were coming into and be able to tell them why. So I got baptized when I was like 12, 13 years old. And it's terrible because it was like from a tragedy in the church, but through it, so many of us got saved. And so I was at like a church camp and there was this boy that we were like all in a line to do a zip line at this church camp. And he was 2 people in front of me, which is wild. And something happened with the elasticity and the rope where he went down the zip line and hit a tree and died. So think about the pain that like everyone who witnessed it, his family, like everything. And that's not supposed to happen at a church camp,
No,
right?
exactly.
Like you
That's
talk
what
about
the
questioning God, saying why, like you're at a church camp and that happens. But through it, so many of us got saved, even at a young age. And I'm like looking back, I can't even imagine what the parents were going through, but I met with them when I decided that I wanted to get saved. And they were like, look, if you're the only one that commits your life to the Lord through this, then like his death, he fulfilled his goal on earth, which is like, talk about humility and grace from a parent. But so through that, we were at the church and just like praising and just like praying for the family and stuff. And this was like right when we got back from the camp. And my dad and I have always been super close. Like, he is my best friend and he's always been right by my side. My mom is too, but like, I'm a daddy's girl. And we were getting in his car after like worshiping and stuff. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I was leaving the church and I just like felt the Lord for the first time, like really like felt the Lord being like, and I was like, okay, this is real. Like, what I grew up learning about and what my parents had taught me, like, this is real. And I look at my dad and I was like, Daddy, I feel like the Lord is right here with us. And he's like, pulls the car over and he's like, okay, tell me more. And it was an incredible moment for him too. But I was like, I want to be baptized. Like, I want to just totally devote my life to the Lord. And it's a feeling that I still remember for 16, 17 years later, because it was so real and it was so like just transparent. And so the next Sunday, like, I was baptized at the church and saved and like got to know this little boy's like family and everything. And they were so thankful that like something positive came out of it. But that was like my first real, true, come to Jesus meeting, like, okay, this is all in. And then I've had multiple throughout the years from that. And I think like a more older version was like before I moved to Dallas, I was like going through some stuff with my career, like, and that was really tough. And I was like, okay, do I want to move to Dallas? Like, what do I want to do next? And felt the Lord like speaking to me again, and he put Galatians 1:10 in my head, and basically in summary just saying like, are you living for me, or are you living for the approval of a man or of men? And are you trying to work to satisfy an employer that's going to promote you or that's going to give you your dream job, or are you like trying to live for me? And that woke me up, and I was like, okay, whatever happens in my career, if I'm meant to be a sports reporter for many, many years, I will be, great. But if not, like, I'll pivot and I'll do what the Lord wants me to do. And so that was like before July of last year, the big one that was just like, okay, you're going through a lot right now. It's been a really hard time work-wise, but like, no matter what, the Lord is going to provide. Luckily he did. And luckily it all worked out the way I wanted it to. But ultimately, if it hadn't, I really, really felt him preaching to me then. So Galatians 1:10 is my phone background and something that I still like think about every single day. If I get in my head or if I don't know what's coming or what's next, it's like, it doesn't matter who I'm living for. Like, I'm living for the Lord. So.
Well, we always strapped up. So, I'ma just turn to it.
I love it.
We stay strapped. We stay strapped. Because the scripture declares that the sword of the Spirit is the word of God. So you got to stay strapped with your weapons. Okay, so Galatians 1:10, for am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. That's your phone background. Mm-hmm. That's it right there. That's your calling card.
Yeah.
And in our industry, I
don't know if y'all. Sorry, what?
Well, I was just gonna say, in our industry, like, how difficult is that to accept? I just feel like it's so difficult.
It's incredibly difficult to accept, as you mentioned, because of the industry we're in. Mm-hmm. And I was at. So there's this conference, it's called PAO, Professional Athletes Outreach, and they do one for like MLB, NBA, NHL, NFL. And because my husband was playing baseball, I was able to go to it with him. And it was just like the most incredible thing where just believers of your sport come together. And I think actually last year the MLB one was in Tampa, but it was.
Ain't nobody tell me nothing.
Oh no, it was amazing. It was great. Not the one I went to was in Tampa, but anyways, we're sitting there, and my husband and I had moved to Dallas, but because of contracts, I was still like trying to figure out situations for what I can speak on. And we had just uprooted our entire life to Dallas and didn't really know what the future was going to hold. And we were in that conference, and we were just praising and we were worshiping. And I just was like bawling because the pastor like put Galatians 1:10 up there. And there was song lyrics that came across, like, it doesn't matter what happens as long as the Lord's holding me type of thing. And in that moment, I felt like my world was like collapsing. Like, I'm somebody that's like never been in trouble, never like broke the rules type of thing. And I like felt like guilty for certain things. And through work and things. And so Colton looks at me and he's like, this is hitting you right now, isn't it? And I just like broke down. And that's when like we just turned to Galatians 1:10. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and just started reading it, because it is so important in our career that you don't lose yourself, because I think it's an industry where you can, especially as a female. Like, I'm not going to speak for troubles that you guys go through, but it can be tough as a female in this industry. And, you know, if you do lose yourself, it would be hard, I think, to overcome. And so just really like rooted in that. And I remember like writing a letter. They had us write letters to ourselves that they would send us 6 months later. And luckily all this didn't take 6 months to figure out, but I got it 6 months later, to the day after I made my debut on Rangers Live, like hosting the pre and post game show, the day after. And I was like, wow, this is like pretty incredible. So I read that and I was just like, the Lord had me in the palm of his hand the entire time. But like, it is so difficult, right? But I think also too, to spin it, it's a positive, because we do have a platform of some sort. So we are able to use our voice and do things like this and talk about our relationship and our walk with the Lord. Whereas, you know, we might not have that if we didn't have the platform that we had of being in the media.
Yeah.
So I think we can spin it and use it for a good thing, right? Instead of, you know, it is difficult. I'm not sugarcoating that, but it's also positive that we can like have these conversations and we can speak to our experience of like staying true and faithful to ourselves and our relationship with the Lord. I don't know if you guys have dealt like with that too in the industry, but it can definitely be hard at times, for sure.
Yeah, that's part of the job. I mean, okay, so Madison and I were in the same newsroom, obviously. So some of the stuff that we experienced, of course, we have our own points of view, but they were kind of the same things. I don't want to turn it into a 2-hour bashing session, because it could, because I'm honestly, it could, because like you ask, if you ask any MMJ producer, photographer, whatever, like, tell me about your old station. How much time you got?
Yeah.
People love talking about their old station, but it's I don't want to turn it into that, because first of all, it was our first chance to do local sports on television, and there were so many good things that did come out of it, and it was obedience that led us to Knoxville. So if we weren't obedient before we got to Knoxville, we wouldn't have been in Knoxville, and if we weren't obedient while in Knoxville, she wouldn't be in Dallas, I wouldn't be in Tampa. So I don't want to turn it into that, but there were things, right? There were things, decisions, calls, whatever, that took place that Madison and I didn't necessarily agree with nor appreciate, and some of them we took personally.
Totally.
Those are the times where you're like, where do I go? Because you are frustrated. You got to lean on something. And so if you lean on yourself right now, okay, I'm going to lean on my own understanding. Let me do what I want to do, what my flesh is telling me to do, right? You could do that. Don't work out. Especially when you're in this industry and you know the people that have the power can just be like, bye. And they can just attribute that to something. They can just be like, well, that's just a black man lashing out and being aggressive or whatever it is. And they can look at Madison and say, well, see, that's what women be doing. And then they be like, see, this is why we don't need no women in sports. And then people can do that. Not saying that this happened. This did not happen in Knoxville. but I think we have the wisdom to pause and yield and allow the Holy Spirit to lead us in the right direction. That's what happened, and that's what has to continue to happen. Because there is also, for all three of us right now, there's risk to doing this, to being so bold and being so out loud and saying, nah, I submitted my thoughts, my actions, my way, my body to the Lord, and now I'm doing it his way, when the world is always going to be the opposite. It's always going to be the opposite. That's just what it is. And it's not it's funny that we try to act like it's the new thing. Like, man, look at the world. Look at the world. Why are we being shocked that the world is being the world sometimes? Like, it's literally in scripture telling you what the world was going to do. The letters were written to, Corinthians and Galatians. Like, all of those letters were written because they were involved in some things. You have, like, these were things that people been doing. And it was just, they had to be redirected. But I think we're now in a culture, at least, where there's, and I've said it before, where we have a lot of like, Jesus is cool, shout out to God when I score a touchdown, shout out to God, I'll point to the sky when I hit a home run, but that does not make him Lord over my life. So that's the thing for us, is making it a daily walk, and it does have to be a daily walk. And when Jesus said, deny yourself and follow me, like, that's what it means. That's what it means. And that meant, a lot of times for us in Knoxville, it meant biting our tongue when everything in us did not want to do that. Mm-hmm. And we had to fight that. We had to fight it all the time. And we continue to fight that today, but now, like, we're growing and we're maturing in our faith, and we're maturing and growing in our, earthly minds as well. It just, it gets a little easier, but I think, as Carol Lawson put it, you're just doing better at the hard things, right? You're just doing hard better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think also, just when it comes to the people, right, in the buildings, everyone doesn't believe the same things. And so I think that's also been some hurdles I've been going through lately. It's just loving people that some others may not feel like deserve love. But to me, it's like, I'm loving everybody, and so you get the clicks and stuff like that throughout the newsrooms. But, for me, there is no click. Like, they're all God's people to my eyes. And so it's difficult for other people to see that. And so then, like, coming into a room where, you're trying to show love to everybody, but people are trying to dim your light, that's also some hurdles I've been facing. And it's just tough at times, and so that's why I asked that question, is because, like I said, our industry is just full of people who are great at their jobs. They're very talented, but it doesn't mean we all believe the same things and carry ourselves the same. So
I think to your point too, though, like, I don't know about y'all, but what's been so hard for me in situations is, like, when a believer does you wrong, that was, David, the hardest thing for me was somebody that was a believer.
Yeah.
And we talked about our faith so much and our relationship with the Lord, that then really hurt me. And it's like, how do you work through that? Like, it's easy to dismiss somebody if it's just like, they don't have the Lord, we just got to pray for him. But it's somebody that you sit down with and get vulnerable with and talk about your relationship with the Lord, that then when you're telling them this is something that the Lord is leading you to, they really, hurt you. And, like, for lack of a better word, you feel like they, like, stab you in the back. And so I think that is the hardest thing. And I think where a lot of people, where sometimes Christianity gets a bad rap, because it's like, oh, that's a Christian? Okay. Noted, and that has been something that has been really hard for me still to this day, 2 years later, like, accept and swallow. But you have to. And I think everything truly, like, happens for a reason. Like, there's a reason you're in Austin. There's a reason I'm in Dallas. There's a reason you're in Tampa. And, like, I would not be in Dallas living like my dream job if I hadn't have met David in Knoxville, because David challenged me to be myself on camera in my first job, where I was so green, really had no idea what I was doing, did not need that job.
Who
Like, should
does
not have
though?
gotten that
No
job.
one does in the first job.
But-
None of us, none
No
of us
one
were.
does.
But because,
Yeah.
David challenged me in ways, made me uncomfortable on camera in ways that brought out the best of me. And now I'm able to ad lib and talk a 30-minute show with no notes, no teleprompter, nothing, because of 2-minute hits I used to do with David in Knoxville. So it's like, because of that, I don't resent anything that came, because in any part of my life, I struggled a lot. I played college basketball and I struggled a lot. Like, you talk about somebody that was in charge and was supposed to be a man of faith and a believer that ended up getting fired and made national headlines for verbally abusing his players. Like, you talk about how hard that was to go through. And like, so I think at the end of the day, like, if you've been wronged or harmed by somebody that calls himself a believer, it doesn't make them any less of a Christian as you, or any, like, you're not better than them. They're just struggling with their own demons, just like you're struggling with other demons. And so I think, again, it's like, that's where forgiveness comes along, and like, forgiveness is key. And, sometimes I say, like, I'm going to forgive that situation, but I'm not going to forget it, because it's going to, like, it's shaping me. It shapes where I am now, every little thing. Going through what I went through in college with a coach that just was not a good person. And I don't care to speak that way these days, because I kept quiet for 10 years, but now it's made headlines. So, we're opening up about it. But, when somebody does you wrong, like, you forgive them, but you're not going to forget it, because it's all part of your story and it leads you to where you are. And I think, it just, as a female, it gives you more of a backbone. It makes you stand up for yourself and lead you to where you are. So I think everything is kind of full circle, and God's plan is working in every little way.
I think two things on that front real quick. The first thing is what you were saying. Hey, when a believer does you wrong, like, then what do you do? Some people will blame that on Christ himself, which we do have to get away from. The way Dr. Frank Turk puts it is, if somebody gets on a piano and plays Beethoven incorrectly, we don't blame Beethoven. You blame the person that was playing Beethoven. And you be like, it's not Beethoven's fault though. Like, Beethoven wrote a beautiful song, right? Jesus was a perfect example. He was sinless. So when you have somebody who claims to follow him and they fall short, we don't blame the source for that, because the example we have didn't change. The person following the example fell short, and we're human. We're gonna fall short. That's something that they need to repent of. And that's something that they need to deal with. That's the first thing. And so that's where sometimes people can get a little, they get a little confused on just saying, hey, this human made a mistake, but we don't blame the man who was not only human but God, right? Fully man, fully God, wrapped in God's word, wrapped in flesh. We can't. He didn't change, because this person who said they followed him came up short. That's the first thing. The second thing is, for really all three of us, and this just came up as y'all were talking about how to move, like, hey, this, they don't have the Lord, we just gonna pray for him. That reminded me of something that I heard that, Cory, I think you're doing a good job of it, and I need to, like, challenge myself to do better at it. But I heard a phrase that said, you may be the only Bible somebody ever reads. So the way you act in that newsroom, the way you act in studio, if the teleprompter start tripping up, if the director don't pull the video up, or if the producer in your ear during a live shot talking about stretch, because for some reason they can't hit play on your package that you done submitted 3 hours ago. That package is in there. You ain't missed a lot.
Yeah.
And they stretch. I ain't got nothing else to say. Stretch.
Or toss the break out of nowhere. We're out of time.
Right. I'm about to toss the break. You know what I'm saying? The way you react in those moments, if you're going to claim Christ, right, the way you react in those moments you have to understand that may be the only scripture they ever read, because everything we do, we can trace it back, right? Did I react in anger? Did I say something? Did I curse my neighbor? What did I do in that moment that for them is going to be a defining moment of my character?
Yeah,
right.
Thanks.
I can trace this back to them. So we have to remember that sometimes there is someone who has never read the scriptures. They have their own presuppositions, and if y'all ever want to get into a discussion about the evidence for God and the evidence of the resurrection, that's fine if they ever want to do that. But if they don't, which usually doesn't happen at work anyway, then understand you may be the only Bible that they ever read.
That is so difficult at times. Anyone listening right now? Of course it is. Like, I have no idea. I have no idea. When you stack the show, produce a show beautifully, just beautifully, you're just excited to do your job, right? And you're excited to go out there and showcase what you stack, what you produced, and then someone else, it's out of your control, right? And I think that's something that God's been working with me personally. And it's funny that you brought that up, David, because it's like, I love to have control. I shoot my own stuff, write my own stuff, edit, and it's partially because it's the job, but also partially I love it. I love having full control. And so God has been trying to teach me just, you gotta let go. Whether it's a photog shooting my story instead of me shooting it, or like we're just discussing, the directors punching stuff up and making sure things go smoothly, but when it doesn't, how do you respond? And I think that is something that I've been blessed with patience with other people, because I've seen it. I've seen it how people have told me, like, yeah, I love when you post on social media about Christ. So it's like, oh, I know you're watching, right? So the eyes are on you. Then now in real time, how do you handle yourself? And it's always hey, we'll get it next time. Or it's okay, it happens. You do it happens. I understand no one's perfect. I always tell my production staff that, like, no one's perfect. Like, we're going to mess up. I'm going to stumble over my words tomorrow, probably. So I think that's how I kind of handle it. But I'm interested to hear how y'all handle it, just because it is an internal battle, to not pop off, for me at least. But the reason is because I know, like you mentioned, I am an example, a Christ-like example, and they're going to look to me to see if I show those characteristics that I say that I read about. So.
Specifically, I do want to hear from Madison, without saying any names, the first blitz we did in 2021. Look at her face, because she know exactly what I'm talking about.
Trauma.
She know exactly what I'm talking about. I want to know how she reacted, because the thing, once I started working with her,
I'm sweating.
because Madison get as red as Elmo, and you can tell when something's wrong. You can tell when something's wrong with her, because she turned into Elmo, and it's like, what's up with Madison right now? And when I watch the show back, I'm looking at her face, like when I watch it back like months later, and I look at her face. And what's funny is I still got the clips on my phone. They ain't gone. I still got them.
Locked up.
Yeah, they on my phone forever. I gotta know your, how you handled that. Speaking to what Cory was just referencing.
You know how I was, for lack of a better word. Yeah, I'll tell you how I should have handled that. I should have had more grace. But I think, to your point, Cory, like, we put so much into this, right? Like, we love our jobs, and especially when you're shooting, editing, writing, doing it all. Like, that is your work, that is your name. Like, and I think that's the hardest thing of being an on-air talent, is it might not be your mistake, but you're the one up there on TV where it looks like your mistake, and your phone's gonna blow up if you, like, brutally mess something up.
Yeah.
But I think that's just where you have to go and, like, have grace. And in that situation where David is talking, like, that was tough for us, because, and so I started my first TV job during the pandemic, and our station was really, like, following every little thing, and I did not anchor my first sportscast in the studio 14 months after I got my job. So June of 2021 was my first time stepping foot in the studio, and I was hired in March of 2020. end of March. So that was really tough. So this was 2020, and it was only like the second or third time I was like in a studio at work, like working with David, like face to face. And we had been working together for a year. Like we didn't have those opportunities. And so, we're putting so much into this. David's taking the reins, like doing this show, like really like executive producer sort of thing. And it was still a situation where I was like not even that comfortable doing like high school football highlights because I had never really done them before. So I think in that moment, it taught me so much too, that like if things go wrong, like David just went with it. Like he knew what to do. He like handled it so well. He just spoke through it all. And nobody was more upset in that situation than the people that were involved, or, humiliated, whatever it may be. But I think again, like David and I's face was on so much and being talked about in certain ways that we were like, wait, that's not us. Like we didn't drop the ball on this. Like, you know what I mean? And so it was really bad, but we've all had those moments on live TV, and I will never forget, like, pointing the finger at me, like I, was about to make my Rangers Live debut, and it's a 30-minute show on Bally Sports. Like, we have the Rangers broadcast, so, like, I'm a pregame host, and the show is 30 minutes leading up to first pitch. My first time, I had hosted, like, some NBA shows, but first time hosting baseball at the ballpark, sold out crowd, Rangers versus Astros, 1-2 in the West, like, and they throw me in the seat and they're like sink or swim, which I appreciated. It was amazing. But 3 minutes before I went on air, the Rangers trade for Aroldis Chapman. So our entire A block scratched. Not gonna lie, I like baseball, but like I wasn't locked in on who the best closers were in Major League Baseball. Like I was dipping my feet in. It's first time covering Major League Baseball, whatever. So we have a guy on our team, Adolis Garcia, Aroldis Chapman. We're rolling. We're having a great conversation. I'm like, I'm crushing this. Like I feel so comfortable. And I'm like, big news, Rangers trade for Adolis Chapman. Like I combined Adolis Garcia and Aroldis Chapman. I'm rolling. I don't understand it. And like, luckily I'm working with an analyst who's just like a vet. Producer's not in my ear correcting me. So like, I don't know. I don't even realize I say it until one of our social media people tweet the clip of like, huge get for the Rangers, and I'm mispronouncing his name. So I'm like, for real?
Well, Maddie didn't catch that either. Like,
but you know what? It was like a great joke among like everyone, because everyone was like, don't worry, we don't even know, like we butchered it too. It was like everyone showed me grace and humility. But of course, that's all I remembered about my first show. And it's like, why did I fixate? Obviously, that was bad. Like for me, I'm like, you got to get people's names right. That's the only thing they have. Like you got to get their name right. But I butchered it in that moment. Of course, my husband's laughing at me because he's like, Madison, he's like the best closer like in the game right now. And I'm like, dang it. So and it's like, I knew his name, but in the moment the camera was on and I'm rolling and I like butcher it. So I tell that story because it's like, that just happens when you're on live TV and you kind of just have to brush it off. And now if I make a mistake, like I will joke about it with myself. Like I will bring light to it because the viewers, they want to see you real. Like everyone makes mistakes and they want to be able to relate with you and not just like be stiff with it. But definitely a moment where I was like, okay, we all make bad mistakes. This is not the only mistake I've made or will make. And in that situation, we just have to show ourselves grace. But that was something that I controlled and messed up. Like when it's out of your control, like you were talking about, Cory, that's when it gets really hard because it's like you work so hard to have everything in line, to have a perfect sportscast. And then if something out of your control happens, you're like, like I tell people this all the time that want to get in the industry. You see the best 2 minutes of our day. You don't see the 12 hours before when we were shooting high school football highlights in the pouring rain and editing under a deadline and trying to make slot. Like, you don't see that. You see the best 2 minutes, and you don't even see us for 2 minutes. You see us for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, thanks.
So
yeah.
It's like, mistakes are going to happen and you just got to roll with it.
I do want to touch on one more thing with what you just said, Madison, because going back to when you mess up, right? And the enemy uses that so much in my mind, like saying you're not good enough, saying that, you should do better, you should have done better. But at the end of the day, you can't do anything about it, right? And that's what I've been trying to tell myself whenever I make mistakes on air. It's just like, stop listening to the enemy filling my thoughts with that, because God has me here for a reason, like you mentioned earlier. And God got me this position to the management to trust me, the viewers to trust me. And I think if I get one email, then the whole city thinks that same thing, but that's not the case. That's not the case. And so I'm interested to know, just how do you kind of go with the ups and downs of knowing your identity in Christ and knowing that your job doesn't identify you, but trying to deflect those negative thoughts whenever you do struggle at times within the job.
Yeah, I think becoming a mom has helped me a lot with that too. And I've only been a mom for 3 months, but like, that's my best job. Like that and being a wife is my number one, like biblically, like that is my role. And then being a sports reporter and loving my job outside of the house, like, is great too. But like, that's my job, like, that's not my identity. Being a good wife and being a good mom is more so my identity. And so I think, again, perspective is key. And it is hard though. And I'm not saying like, oh, it's just hard for females, because I know you guys deal with it too, but people can be ruthless with females and, judging the way they look or the way they talk, or they don't know sports, they don't know that, they don't know this. And I am thankful that everywhere I've worked has been a place that like promotes females, promotes diversity, like in a way to an extent, but could always be better. But I'm thankful that my current job is very good at that. And they've made me an NBA analyst, and I've never played in the NBA. But I'm at the table talking with two guys that played 14 years in the NBA, and they're listening to me. They're having conversations with me. They're wanting to know my thoughts on the game. So I respect that and I appreciate that, but I know it's not like that everywhere. But to your point, Cory, like, when you get a response from somebody, that's one person. You can't think everyone thinks that. And I think as I get older in my career, doing this now for 7 years, that's easier said than done now. More so now I can do that, but before it was like, it really like affected me. And that was hard starting out, like, especially when your first job, full-time job on camera, is in a pandemic and you don't really even know what you're doing. So you're of course going to get a lot of feedback and a lot of critiques, but it's from a bunch of armchair quarterbacks that have never been in your shoes and don't know what you're dealing with or going through. And somebody asked me the other day, like, how do I filter people's advice? And right now, I'm only taking advice on my work from my executives, from my bosses, and from the teams I work for. Because if I look for all this advice, not that it wouldn't be good advice, but if I try and get critiques and feedbacks like I used to do I'd be like, anyone who would listen, give me your advice. And then I started getting advice that didn't match what my bosses wanted. So I'm like, well, who pays my bills? Not this random person, in California, like my bosses pay my bills, So it's like, I have learned as I've gotten older to only really like appreciate the feedback from my current bosses, or maybe an exec of where I would want to go one day. Because if you listen to all the outside noise, you're not going to be your genuine self. And the second you're not yourself in this industry, like, people know, like, who I am, my personality on air is not who Laura Rutledge is, or, you know, other women that I work with, but they are great and they're amazing in their own right. But that's not me. And the second I try to be them, I'm going to fail and people are going to know that I'm not genuine. And so if somebody has a comment, great. Let them have that opinion. Let them have that comment. Maybe some of it's true. Maybe you can learn from a little bit of it. But if not, like, just keep doing your thing, because everyone's going to want to give you their advice and their feedback. But ultimately, like, who really is the one that you want to take advice from and you want that feedback from? And it's your bosses when we're talking about our work, you know, or your coworkers or your producers. It's not somebody on Twitter messaging you because they didn't like that you showed your shoulders on camera. Like, you know,
Yeah.
so I think you could just kind of have to take some things with a grain of salt. But again, it's all easier said than done. Like, I don't want anyone listening to think, oh, they have it all figured out. Because, like, we don't. We're still all young in our careers. We're still all figuring it out. And each day is different. One day I could feel really great about the work I've done. And the next day I could beat myself up over the littlest thing when I'm sitting here talking about, like, I can't do that. You know, so it's trial by error, and it's one step at a time for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. Madison, thank you so much for sitting on the Believers Bench with us, joining us here on Game Day Grace. We will get your husband on, so people will get to meet Colton. We'll hear things from his perspective, and we just thank you so much for making some time out. I know 2 girls, you're a wife, you're a mom of twins. I mean, it's a lot you've got on your plate. Yeah, it's a lot. So thank you so much for just giving us a little bit of time and your transparency as well.
Yeah. Anything for you, you know that. And Cory, big fan of you now too. So we'll all have to stay in touch. And if you're in Dallas, you got to let me know. Wish I knew you were here for media days.
I know. I gotta leave. I know. I was chopping up with Michelle though. We talked about her earlier, you know. So we got to connect again. But yeah, now we know though. You know what I'm saying? We locked in.
Yes, we are. We are, for sure. No, guys, I appreciate it. What y'all are doing is great, and I'm honored to be a guest. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Madison. All right, everybody. Until next time, be easy and be blessed.